Okay, good morning, children. Now, in biology, today we are going to start with the new chapter, and that is circulatory system in humans. Now, children, you all have already learned the different systems that we have in our body, and it is due to the proper functioning of all these systems we are able to survive, and even our body does all the activities in order to keep us alive. So that means due to the digestive system, each and every part of our body gets nutrients and oxygen for energy. And due to the excretory system, the waste product that is formed inside our body can be easily removed from our body, right? And due to the respiratory system, our body gets oxygen, without which we cannot survive. But children, it is possible only if all these different important substances like nutrients, oxygen, certain chemicals, if they are transported to their respective organ, then only the different systems can do their function properly. So how does that happen? Who will transport all these nutrients, oxygen to different parts of our body? Now, it is the circulatory system. So what is circulatory system? Circulatory system is a well-developed system whose function is to transport oxygen, nutrients, waste products, and certain chemicals like hormones within our body. Now, parts of a circulatory system. So if you see the parts of a circulatory system, then circulatory system has three main parts, and they are blood, blood vessels, and heart. Okay, so these are the three main parts. The help of circulatory system can do their function properly. So today we are going to discuss about now blood and its components. Now externally you all must have seen the blood, right? It is red in color and it is in the liquid form, isn't it? But if you see this blood in detail, then this blood has two components, which means that blood has two parts which forms the blood. Okay, so blood, it is a fluid connective tissue, and it is the most specialized body fluid. And the different components of the blood are plasma and blood corpuscles. The two main components of the blood are plasma and blood corpuscles, and the main function of the blood is to carry oxygen, nutrients, waste products, and certain chemicals to each and every part of our body. So the human body on an average has about 4 to 6 liters of blood. Now we are going to discuss components of blood. The first one is plasma. Now plasma, it is the liquid form of the blood, and plasma, it is the single most largest component of the blood. This plasma is pale yellow in color, and the total volume of plasma on an average normal adult is about 2.5 or 3 liters. And this plasma contains certain chemicals, proteins, oxygen, digested nutrients. So if you see the presence of these different substances in plasma in percentage, then this plasma contains about 55 to 60% of blood, then 90 to 92% of water, 7 to 8% of protein, and 1% of inorganic salt, and some traces of other substances. And the main function of the plasma is to transport nutrients, oxygen, chemicals, to the lungs and to the different parts of our body when it need. Now, the plasma also helps to remove the waste from our body. So, plasma, what we can say is a kind of transporting medium. Okay. Now, the next component of the blood is blood corpuscles. Now, blood corpuscles means it is the blood cells. So, these blood corpuscles are the blood cells. Okay. And these blood corpuscles, if you see the types of blood corpuscles, then there are three main types of blood corpuscles. And they are red blood cells, white blood cells, and blood platelets. So these are the three main blood cells or blood corpuscles. And these blood corpuscles constitute about 40 to 45% of blood. Right. Now we will discuss these different types of blood cells or blood corpuscles one by one. So the first one is red blood cells. Now another name of red blood cell is erythrocytes. It is also called erythrocytes. And these red blood cells, these are the type of cells which are formed or produced in the bone marrow, and they are found in blood. So what is bone marrow? Now bone marrow, it is a soft spongy tissue which is present inside our bones and which will help to make blood formation cells, which are also called blood stem cells. So since these red blood cells are produced in the bone marrow, which means without bone marrow, our body could not get red blood cells, white blood cells, and blood platelets. So bone marrow plays an important role in the formation of blood. Okay, so since we are discussing red blood cells, if you see the shape of red blood cells, then they are disc-shaped cells, bioconcave. And these red blood cells, they do not have nucleus. Nucleus is absent, but they have a protein called hemoglobin. And the function of hemoglobin is to transport oxygen to the lungs and from the lungs to the different parts of the body. And if you see the red blood cells, the color of the red blood cells, then they are red in color due to the presence of these hemoglobin. Now, since red blood cells are formed in the bone marrow, so they do not contain nucleus, right? So the advantage of the absence of nucleus is it will increase the surface area for the transportation of oxygen by hemoglobin. So that means the lifespan of red blood cells are about 120 days. Means red blood cells will live only for 120 days. Why is that? Now the reason is since the red blood cells are produced in the bone marrow, so they are also living things, so they do grow there. And once they will become mature, then their nucleus, they will lose their nucleus and some of their important organelles. So due to the loss of nucleus and certain organelles, these red blood cells, they cannot repair themselves when damaged. And this will give a certain limit for them to live only for about 120 days. And these red blood cells, these are the most abundant components of blood found in blood. And if you see the number of red blood cells that is present in the blood, then there are about 5 millions to 6 millions of red blood cells per millimeter cube. Okay. Now the next one is white blood cells. The other name of white blood cell is leukocytes. Now these white blood cells are also produced in the bone marrow and they are also formed in the lymph nodes. Now what do you mean by lymph nodes? Now lymph nodes, they are the small structures which act like a filter okay, to filter the harmful substances from the blood. So in that way, these white blood cells, they will protect our body from diseases and illness. So they are also called immune cells. Okay, so these white blood cells, they will flow in the bloodstream to fight against the virus, bacteria, and certain foreign invaders who will threaten our life. That's why these white blood cells, they are immune cells which help to destroy germs. Okay, so where is this lymph node located in our body? Now these lymph nodes are located all throughout our body. All right, then the lifespan of white blood cells are ranging from 12 hours to 12 days. So they will live for sometimes for 12 hours, or some of them they will live for 12 days. And these white blood cells, they are less in number than red blood cells. So if you see the blood count of white blood cells, then there are about 3,000 to 4,000 white blood cells. So any abnormal increase in the number of white blood cells, let's say for example, if the count of white blood cells is above 50,000, then it indicates that there is an infection in our body. All right, so this is about white blood cells. Then comes blood platelets. Now, another name of blood platelets are thrombocytes. Now, these blood platelets, they are smaller than both red blood cells and white blood cells. And these blood platelets are disc-shaped, and they are also colorless, okay, and that means colorless means they do not have hemoglobin, okay, and the nucleus is also absent. Then the number of blood platelets is about 2 to 4 lakhs. And if you see and these blood platelets, they are also produced in the bone marrow. And the function of the blood platelets is to prevent the loss of blood. Okay, so they will prevent the blood loss by forming a clot around the wounds and cuts to prevent bleeding. And the lifespan of blood platelets is about 3 to 7 days. So if you compare these three components of blood corpuscles, or three components of blood, red blood cells, white blood cells, and blood corpuscles, you can see that in your textbook only on page 63. Okay, so let's do that. So color, if you compare the color of these three blood components, then red blood cells, they are red in color due to the presence of hemoglobin, and white blood cells and blood platelets, they are colorless due to the absence of hemoglobin. Then if you see the shape of these three blood components, then red blood cells, they are biconcave. Then leukocytes, they do not. Leukocytes means white blood cells. They do not have fixed shape. They are irregular in shape. They will keep on changing their shapes. And again, the blood platelets, they are disc-shaped. Then compare the number of all these three components. Then there are about 5 million to 6 million of red blood cells. Then 4,000 to 13,000 of white blood cells, and about 2 lakhs to 4 lakhs of blood platelets. Then the lifespan, compare the lifespan. Red blood cells, they will live for 120 days. White blood cells will live for 12 hours or sometimes for 12 days. And these blood platelets, they will live for either 3 days or 7 days. Then if you see the presence of nucleus, then in red blood cells, When they'll become mature, the nucleus is absent. And in white blood cells, nucleus is present, and in blood platelets, nucleus is absent. Then if you see the formation, where do they form? Then red blood cells are produced or formed in the bone marrow. White blood cells are formed in bone marrow and lymph nodes. Then blood platelets are also produced in bone marrow. Then the function of all these three blood components are, the function of red blood cells are to transport nutrients and oxygen, and the functions of white blood cells are to protect the body from diseases or from germs, and the function of blood platelets are blood clotting. So, in the next class, children, we will discuss about the functions and the types of blood group. So, thank you, children.